give a very warm welcome to Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson.
Well, thank you. I have to say this is a much bigger crowd than I got at UVU a couple of weeks ago, so thank you for that. It's great to be here with all of you today. My name is Deidre. Deidre Henderson. I'm the Lieutenant Governor. Would love a raise of hands if anybody knows what the heck a Lieutenant Governor is. Oh, Stephen, put your hand down. You tell me.
You're the backup governor.
I'm the backup governor. Okay, you know what? It's never been put quite that way before, but that's a really good way to put it. I'm like the vice governor, second in command in the state, which, if we're being completely honest, in our cone of silence right here, is kind of an awkward position to be in. But it's also a really wonderful spot. Something that I never thought that I would actually do. I did never think that I would run for public office in the first place. I do have to give a little shout out. I have 5 kids, 4 daughters, 1 son, 3 sons-in-law, 2 little grandsons. And 2 of my children and 1 of my sons-in-law are here today. We've got Matt, and I'm looking at my daughter Brooklyn as I say her husband's name, Matt. We've got Brooklyn here and Sydney, who are my 2 youngest daughters, and Brooklyn's husband, Matt, who graduated from SUU last year in business, and is an entrepreneur himself, and a great human being and a great addition to our family. Sydney's in the theater program here. Brooklyn is in her last year of nursing school. She actually is a senator of the I'm going to get it wrong, College of Health Sciences, and Matt was a senator of the School of Business back in the day. I once ran for student body office. I ran for 7th grade secretary, and I was really shy. I was a shy little 7th grader. My mom, who is an artist, she made my campaign posters for me, and she drew a picture of this fluffy little rabbit and said on there, no bunny would be better, vote Deidre for 7th grade secretary. And I was too shy to actually campaign, so I didn't tell anybody why I wanted to be 7th grade secretary or what my vision was for Benyon Junior High School. And in fact, I was so afraid of the whole thing that on the day during the assembly where they announced the winners, I actually hid in the girls' bathroom during that assembly, and I actually lost that race. Probably not a big surprise. I lost that race. So when I ran again for office, and I didn't think I would ever do that again. That was a terrible experience. When I ran for office again in 2012, running for the Utah State Senate, I didn't have my mom draw my campaign signs that time, and I won that race. And I'm not going to blame my loss on my mom or my win on my mom, but I learned a lot throughout my life, and I would love to share a few of the things that I've learned, a little bit of my journey to where I am today, some of the things that I've done, lessons that I've learned, and hope that you can find something useful for you in your life. Do we have any, it's hard to describe what a non-traditional student is. You kind of know one when you are one, but any non-traditional students in here? Okay, we've got a few. Okay, that's great. I also was a non-traditional student, and so I applaud those of you who have decided to come back to school and finish what you might have started quite a while ago. For me, it took about 30 years to finish my degree. I graduated last year from BYU with a degree in history. I walked on the same day that my son graduated from BYU as well. It took him 3 years to do what it took me almost 30 to do. But it was really important for me to finish my degree, and I learned a lot. I was actually a much better student as an adult, a more experienced adult than I was as a young, barely 18-year-old when I started BYU. But I went to BYU, did what I swore I would never do, which was got married after my freshman year, and then I dropped out of school, worked a couple of jobs to try to get my husband through physical therapy school. By the time he was done with physical therapy school, we had 2 babies, 2 baby girls. Not these 2. These are my youngest 2. But we had 2 kids. My husband was from North Carolina. We went back there for him to go to physical therapy school, and then we moved back to Utah, to Provo. He got a job in Provo, and we were looking for a house. Found a house in Spanish Fork. It was the only thing we could afford. And then I had 5 kids by the time I was 28. So I was really looking for, when my youngest, who is sitting right there, started school, I was really looking for a way to get more involved in the community, looking for what I wanted to do next. I had a few little business ventures that I did. Was pretty terrible at it. In fact, one of them was candy machines. Like I bought these candy machines, and I was going to make some money off of this. I was going to put these candy machines in businesses, and so I went to the first business, and I walked in, and gave my pitch. First time I'd ever done anything like that. The business owner politely declined, and I went back to my car and sat in my car and cried in the parking lot. I was not good at that. Did not work out very well for me. So I was looking for these ways that I could do something more. And I felt really insecure because I hadn't finished school. I had been out of the workforce for a long time. I didn't feel like I had skills that I needed to be able to actually do something meaningful, make some money, and contribute in outside of my own little family sphere. And I really wanted to. In this very beginning, January of 2008, my youngest was in school, and I met someone who was running for Congress. He was running against a 12-year incumbent congressman, and he was looking for people to volunteer for him. He had no name recognition, he had no money, so he was looking for people who were willing to volunteer because he couldn't afford to pay people who knew what they were doing. And so I volunteered to make phone calls. And again, was very afraid of being rejected, didn't like being told no, was worried about people being mad at me or yelling at me on the phone as I made phone calls about this candidate. One thing led to another, and as I accomplished tasks, he would give me more tasks to do, and I started to discover that I was pretty good at it. Because of my ability and his need, my ability to volunteer, to work for free, and his need to find people who were willing to do stuff that he couldn't afford to pay people to do. I actually got a lot of experience that year. I ended up working that entire year for free. If I would have known in January of 2008 what that year would have looked like for me, I ended up working 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, the whole year to try to get this guy elected to Congress, which we did do, by the way. If I had known at the beginning what was entailed, I wouldn't have done it. I would never have said, yeah, I'm totally gonna do that. So I'm really glad I didn't know, because I'm glad that I made that first phone call. I'm glad that I raised my hand and volunteered. And by the time we were done with that year, I did have a lot of experience. I had a lot of, I developed a lot of skills. And he asked me the day after he won the election in November of 2008, he asked me to run his campaign for him, to be his campaign manager, run his political operation. And so I started doing that out of my laundry room in Spanish Fork, where we lived. I still had 5 little kids at home, and I ran his political operation for about 4 more years. And then in 2012, there was some redistricting that happened. Anybody know what redistricting is? Yeah, come on.
Well, basically they changed the areas of where votes go for certain representatives.
Right.
And it can skew votes for the next election too.
Correct. Okay, so redistricting is just, there are congressional districts. Every state has at least one member of one member of that U.S. House of Representatives, and then we have a bunch of local legislators, right? And someone has to draw those lines. And every 10 years, those lines are redrawn based on new census numbers that come in, because we want equal number of lives in each of the districts. So redistricting happened, and some legislative districts were shuffled around because of population growth in certain areas. My area where I live, Spanish Fork in South Utah County. Anybody here from Spanish Fork besides my kids? Anybody here know where Spanish Fork is? A couple of you, okay. It's great, it's a great town. Because of redistricting, my area got a new Senate seat. They took a Utah State Senate, so we're talking state legislature making laws for the state, not in Washington, D.C. They took a Senate seat from East Bench in Salt Lake City and plopped it down in South Utah County. So because of that 4 years of working for a congressman and getting involved in politics that way, when this new seat opened up, I was in a position where I thought, I can run for that. I can do it. But of course I was scared, so I almost didn't, because I might lose, which was what had happened the first time I tried to run for office in 7th grade. And but I decided to go ahead and run for that open seat, and I won. So I won a seat in the Utah State Senate in 2012. Now, what I didn't realize at the time, and that I found out a little bit quickly when I went into the Senate, was I was only the 28th woman in Utah State history to win a seat in the Utah State Senate. We have 29 senators in the Utah State Senate. Is there anyone in here from out of state, from another state? Okay, a few of you, but most of you are from Utah. And every state does things just a little bit differently. But in Utah, we have 29 state senators because we have 29 counties. And every senator used to represent a county, kind of like on the federal level, how representatives represent, they're based on the population, however many people a state has. But in the Senate, every state is represented equally with 2 senators. So that's kind of how things were done at the local level here in the state of Utah for a while. It's not done that way anymore, but we have 29 senators. So since statehood in 1896, there were hundreds and hundreds of people who have been elected to the Utah Senate, but only up until that point, only 28 women elected. And what I also did, I'm a Republican, and what I also didn't realize until I got there was that I doubled the number of Republican women in the Utah State Senate. Well, there were one other Republican woman. The Democrats did it way better. They have a very small group, but most of them were women. But there were a lot of Republicans and only one Republican woman. So I made 2. By the time I left the Utah Senate, there were more Republican men named Dan in the Utah Senate than there were Republican women. There were 3 Dans and 2 women. And so it didn't take me very long to realize that I had a perspective and a voice that was unique in the lawmaking body in our state. And that my perspective wasn't better than anybody else's. It was just different. And it was a perspective that was needed. And once I had that realization, I started to be a little bit more assertive about how I made sure that my perspective was heard. And what I learned really quickly was it is not hard to make a difference. It's about stepping up and speaking up. And it's about innovating. It's not a lot different than being an entrepreneur. In my time in government service, I have discovered that I like to solve problems, which is one of the things I love about state government, is we can actually solve problems. It doesn't seem like Washington, D.C. necessarily can solve problems at the same rate that they cause more problems than they solve, it seems like. But we can solve a lot of problems in state government, and I love that about it. And so I found that I was good at identifying problems that needed to be solved, sometimes problems that people had been trying to solve for years, and bringing people together to try to figure out solutions. my very first year, I was made chair of the Senate Revenue and Taxation Committee. Now, remember, I hadn't graduated from college yet. I was the only woman on the committee. Some of the other committee members on my Senate Revenue and Taxation Committee were actually tax professionals. There was a CPA on the committee. There was another one of the senators was the president of the Utah Taxpayers Association. Another one was a tax attorney. And then there was me, who was brand new, not only to the legislature, to the Utah Senate, brand new member of the committee, but I knew absolutely nothing about tax code and didn't know how to chair a committee. And so I worked really hard to read the tax code, which is a riveting read. I highly recommend it. I had to learn how to, I knew that on the second day after I was sworn into office, I would be chairing my first standing committee of the legislature. And so I held, before I was ever even sworn in, I got the committee staff to come. We did mock committee hearings where they presented bills, they amended them, they substituted them, they tried to help me learn all of the motions and the rules and get me prepared to actually chair a committee. And then the first day that I was supposed to chair the committee, the day 2 of the legislative session in 2013, January of 2013, I had a 4 o'clock committee hearing. That was my Rev and Tax committee at 4. And when I get nervous, I feel like puking. And I went all day feeling like I was gonna lose it, feeling like I was gonna throw up. I was so nervous. And I got to committee and promptly forgot every single thing I had ever practiced or learned about how to run a committee. It was terrible. But the next time, a couple days later when I ran my next committee, it clicked and I remembered. And years later, one of the senators who was on that committee said to me, you know what, Deidre, you were just a natural. You were so good at running. I became known for running efficient committee meetings. And he's like, you were just so good at it. You just were a natural. You just naturally knew about tax law. You just naturally knew how to manage a committee and run it efficiently. And I laughed and I'm like, Howard, there was nothing natural about that. I worked really, really hard to make it look like it was that easy for me. It wasn't easy. It was hard. And that's one of the lessons that I've learned is this idea that you don't have to know everything up front. You actually learning along the way is the best way to learn, because you can book learn all you want, but until you actually get in and do it, it's not going to stick. And it's okay to learn as you go. I also realized that I wasn't alone. There were a lot of legislators who also, I figured they knew what they were talking about. I figured they knew everything, and I realized they didn't either. I don't want to scare anyone. We have a part-time lay legislature, and they're good people, and they do the best they can. And the legislature meets every year so that they can fix the mistakes they made the year before. That's part of the wonderful process that we have. But not everybody knows, and sometimes you assume that everybody else knows and you're the only one that doesn't. So asking the questions, jumping in and learning all you can, but then recognizing that it's okay to not know everything before you start doing something is one of the really valuable lessons that I learned. At the time, I had gone back to school a little bit here and there, taking independent study courses, but I had, after my second legislative session, it was the fall of 2014, I had to go back to campus, BYU campus, for a political science class. I was a political science major for like 25 years before I changed to history. And so I went back, I had this political science class. It was probably a class about this big. I was sitting in the back, first week of school, and the department heads came in. And I was a little bit embarrassed. I didn't want them to see me there because those guys didn't know who legislators were, and they thought I was just there to speak. They didn't know I was there as a student. So they were up at the front of the class talking about legislative internship opportunities, and I realized with horror that I didn't qualify to be my own intern. I didn't even have enough credit hours to apply for a legislative internship, but I was the state senator, and I could be the state senator but not the intern. And in that moment, I kind of lost all of my shame and embarrassment about not having finished my college degree. I thought, you know what? There are a lot of people in my position. There are a lot of people who've had to do things a little bit differently in their lives, maybe had to put their own ambitions or dreams or goals on hold to take care of their family or do other things, and it's okay. And so from that time forward, I was really open and honest and upfront about my education journey. And was able to share that with a lot of people. And finally last year, as Lieutenant Governor, finally graduated and was able to walk in the ceremony on the same day that my son was. So those are a few of the things that I've learned, especially as Lieutenant Governor. I've learned a lot. Lieutenant Governors it's an odd spot. When I told my mom I was running for lieutenant governor, she asked me what a lieutenant governor was. She didn't know. I didn't really know. But I've spent the last 3 years trying to figure it out. And essentially, we have there are statutory duties that I have. I oversee elections. I am the keeper of the Great Seal of the state of Utah, which is a very important job, and I oversee things like notaries, incorporations and annexations of municipalities, things like that, kind of mundane things in my staff office side. But then on the other side, on the executive side, I stand in for the governor when I need to. I am the second. I've actually been governor. I was governor in April for 87 minutes. The Chief Justice of the Utah Supreme Court actually transferred gubernatorial power to me while Governor Cox had a colonoscopy. So it was great. It was early in the morning, so I spent my time, my 87 minutes of glory in my pajamas at home. And then I joked that being governor felt a lot like being lieutenant governor. But that was my time as governor. But I am, I also, as lieutenant governor, I do whatever the governor asks me to do. And there are a lot of things that he's tasked me with. One of those things that he tasked me with is overseeing the relationships, our government-to-government sovereign relationships with our sovereign tribes in the state. We have 8 federally recognized Native American tribes. And I have spent a lot of time working with our tribal communities to make sure our relationships are good. We have a past that is challenging, and you know, we are where we are today because of a lot of things that happened in the past, and it's challenging sometimes to figure out why we are where we are and how we can move forward. But it's been one of the things that I have loved about this position. There are a lot of challenging issues, especially around the periphery, the rural parts, the edges of the state where some of our tribal communities are. There's a lot of poverty and some challenges that are tricky to navigate, but it's been one of the things that I've loved the most about this job. I also love getting out into the state and meeting people. And I recognize that getting close to people, having proximity is really, really important. Last year we had I was able to come to the graduation ceremony here at SUU when Condoleezza Rice spoke. She was the keynote speaker at graduation. And one of the things that she said really stuck with me, and I've thought about it a lot since. And what she said was that if you find yourself in the company of others who think exactly the same way that you do, find new company. It's important to get to know people, to understand differences. You don't have to agree with them, but it is important to get to know them. It is important to find common ground and understanding. We live in a world that is far too politicized and far too polarized right now. And studies are showing that people are not only kind of self-sorting. Social media has done this, but also geographically, we're all kind of self-sorting into little bubbles where people think alike. But people are less likely to date those who have differing political views than them, but they're also, studies are showing they're less likely to actually help someone who has differing political views. And you think about that for a minute. What does it take to think that you're not even going to help somebody because they may like a different, I don't know, presidential candidate than you? That it's a pretty tough place to be in right now, and it's a little scary to me, especially as someone who oversees elections. That is not a job that is for the faint of heart anymore. Almost half of Americans, 47% of Americans, believe that the 2020 election was stolen. That's a lot. That's Americans. That's not just Republicans. And so, as someone who oversees elections in the state of Utah, it makes me think: if people don't trust their elections, what are they going to trust? If they don't trust that their vote can be counted accurately, and that the person who won is actually the person who got the most votes, what are we left with in our country? So I love to remind people that our elections are not run by people who live in Washington, D.C. I don't even run elections. They're not run by the states. They're run by our counties. They're run by our local folks, the people who live and work in your communities. They're run by the people that you go to church with or see at the grocery store or go to school with. So one of the most important parts of my job is to help people rebuild that trust in elections, because that is the foundation of our democracy and of our way of life. If we don't trust elections, we're in deep trouble. We're in deep trouble. And if we don't start trusting each other, we're in deep trouble. One of Governor Cox's initiatives that he's been working on, that he's done an incredible job with. Governor Cox and I run on a ticket, so we're a team. When you vote for one of us, you vote for both of us. He's chair of the National Governors Association. Now that means that there are 50 governors in the United States, and he's kind of the leader of all of them right now. And he has an initiative called Disagree Better. And what he's doing is he's going around the country, and he's got all of these governors that are involved in this, Democratic governors, Republican governors, working together. Right now they're creating ads, and they're great ads, and they're talking about how we can disagree on. I just saw one this morning from the Democratic governor of Kansas and the Republican governor of Missouri, who were sitting side by side at a restaurant, debating whether or not, saying that they disagree, that the one thinks that Kansas barbecue is the best, and the other thinks that Missouri barbecue is the best. Just illustrating that they can disagree on certain things, but they both agree on some common ground and some common policies that are good for everybody. And that's the sort of thing that the governor and I have been really trying to message as we go around the state, and also exemplify ourselves. And we're not perfect, but that we can totally disagree on really important things and disagree vehemently. This is not a call for quote unquote civility necessarily. This is a call for being better at the way we disagree, being better at the way we debate, being even open to new ideas, but also being open to having someone else's ideas influence or solidify what you believe yourself. And so these are the things that we're working on in the state. These are the things that we feel are important, and that we feel will help make Utah, keep Utah the really incredible place it is. I know some of you are from out of state. I'm sure your states are great, but Utah's a really great place, and we want to make sure that we keep it great for all of you, for your kids, and we're working on actual policies that hopefully will help with that as well. And I've talked way too long. I would love to answer questions in the last several minutes of class, if you have any for me. Yeah.
So do you think that media kind of painting false narratives in people's minds, and also with like, because when you go out in the real world, a lot of people think the same way. And then when you go online, you have a lot of people saying totally opposite things and vice versa, how they feel. And I'm from California, so I kind of understand how different and broad, beliefs can be. So do you think that has anything to do with the disagreement in the political spectrum? Because when they tried Trump, and they still are, for Russia collusion and all these different hoaxes that turned out to be false narratives, a lot of elected officials did not go back and say, hey, we were totally misinformed about all this. Instead, they went even further to make up more lies. So
Yeah, so the question is about, really, is the media complicit in how divided we are about, in politics specifically? And the answer is yes, absolutely, because outrage sells. Outrage is a lot more interesting than all the good stuff that's happening. There is good stuff that's happening, but nobody, that's not what's interesting often to people. Politicians are also to blame. Because, again, it's much easier to sell yourself based on ginning up fear about someone else. If you can say this person is going to destroy your way of life, they're going to make things miserable for you, they're going to destroy the country, then maybe people that seems to be easier for politicians to sell than, hey, I've got these really great ideas about how we can improve things. It's just an easier way to sell it. So the answer to that, in my mind, is for everybody to be aware of those dynamics and to go to trusted sources. And if you're going to doubt something, or question something, question the things that sound unbelievable. If it sounds unbelievable, it probably is. And unfortunately, we're in a place where we want to believe the worst about everybody and about everybody's intentions. And that's just not a healthy place for us to be in. It's not a place where we can grow and maintain what we have in our way of life if we're doubting each other so much. Yes.
Yeah, so kind of adding on to that, do you think there should be more government oversight when it comes to the free press, or do you think in the long term that would be too much of a slippery slope?
Well, I'm a big believer in the First Amendment, and I think that government oversight over the press is probably not a good idea. But there does need to be some accountability there, and it's hard to know. I think that there does need to be some accountability over maybe social media platforms that use algorithms that can give people false information or keep people in a bubble or addict kids to the platforms. We know that that's really harmful. In fact, our state has, as we filed lawsuit against Meta and against TikTok. We're working on changing social media policies and trying to make sure that our young people who are very negatively affected by social media, that their parents have the tools to help make some changes there.
You talked about how elections are ran by counties and local officials. And so what are the innovative and entrepreneurial ways you guys are trying to get more people into the local level, be more interested, get to county council meetings and city meetings and things like that?
You know what, that is such a great question, and it's so important, and it's so hard. How many of you know when Election Day is in Utah this year? You know? Yes, it's next week. It's a week from today. It's a week from today, and these are municipal elections, except down here, you guys have a special congressional election, which is weird. It doesn't happen very often. I don't think it's ever happened before. So you also are electing a member of Congress because your congressman resigned. So hopefully more people down here will vote. But what we find is people don't vote in municipal elections. They just don't do it. And these are for mayors and city council members. These are people that have a direct impact on your quality of life. a direct, immediate impact on your quality of life, and like nobody votes. So we're doing our best. We're also trying to help people understand what the process is, the checks and balances that we have already put in place to make sure that when you vote, only the people who are eligible to vote can vote, that they can only vote once, that their vote will be counted accurately. We're trying to help educate the public, but it's hard. Last year, we really made a campaign, I say campaign, like an ad campaign to push for people to go to their county clerk's offices and see the process. Go be a poll worker. Go be a poll watcher. Go watch. Everything is done in the public, so you can go watch people counting the ballots. You can watch the audits that take place. You can watch all of that and understand the process. We also know that we're not ever done. We're not ever like, you know what? We do great things in Utah. Elections are good. We're good. We don't need to do anything. We don't need to make it better. We're always trying to find ways to make it better. You know, on my way down this morning, I actually stopped at 2 county clerk's offices. Stopped in the Iron County clerk's office in Parowan, and I also stopped at the Beaver County clerk's office in Beaver. We'll be stopping in Fillmore on the way back north to deliver some PPE, some gloves, some Narcan, and some fentanyl test strips. Did you guys hear about the envelopes that were mailed to 6 election offices in 6 states last week, laced with fentanyl? So there is really some serious challenges that are happening with our local election officials, where they're getting threats, they're getting people literally trying to poison them, and so we're doing our best to make sure that they're safe and fighting the misinformation where we hear it. I saw a hand in the back here. Yeah.
So like, I feel like the reason, like, personally, I don't really vote in city and state elections is because, like, I don't know any of these people besides their faces on the sides of roads.
Yeah.
Where can you find resources on these people? Because I don't know any of their names.
Okay, pull out your pen. Okay, it's vote.utah.gov. Now, here's the big caveat. We have 248 cities and towns in the state of Utah. And there's special service districts that have to elect some people. There are hundreds of races that are happening. We've got over 1,000 candidates, like over 1,200 candidates in the races throughout the state. Not every one of those candidates has filed a profile, a candidate profile, but about 45% of them have. So, but that is a good place to find out. Vote.utah.gov is a statewide vote website, election website where you can find all sorts of information. But your cities should also have some of that information. It's not as interesting to people. So, and some of these city council races and mayors, I mean, they don't have a lot of money, right? Their whole campaign strategy may be to like pound in a few signs and pray. Like that may be their whole strategy. So it is harder, but there usually are some debates or candidate forums or things like that, or Google is a really great tool. Yeah.
So speaking of getting involved in stuff, how do I set myself apart? Is it volunteering? Is it finding a job within there? And then if it is volunteering, what are some of those organizations that I should look to volunteer with?
So setting yourself up for?
Just anything within. I've always wanted to be federal, state, something in there.
So internships are a really great way. There are internship programs, not just with the Utah legislature, but with my office, with federal offices, with departments around the state, and also in Washington, D.C. Those can be done through school. But also volunteering on a campaign is a really great way. And next year is a big election year, right? It's a presidential election year. We've got all 5 of our statewide constitutional offices, so that's governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, state treasurer, state auditor, and then we're all up. We'll have an open U.S. Senate seat. We'll have the congressional race will be up, and then you'll have state legislative and county races as well. It's a big, big year. So there will be a lot of opportunities to volunteer. on a campaign of your choice. And that will provide really good opportunity for you. I love Thomas Edison's quote, "Opportunity is often missed because it comes dressed in overalls and looks like hard work." And sometimes doing that hard work, though, is really, really a meaningful way to get the experience that you need and get the connections and learn the people and the processes that will help you in whatever you decide to do down the road.
We have time for one more question, possibly someone we haven't heard from before, possibly even a lady.
Oh, come on. All right. You didn't have one? I thought
Not a
you.
lady.
Well, but you had a question. I don't see anybody else with a question.
I was just wondering, with the growth of Utah, where you kind of see it going, what's some of the challenges and how are you guys addressing them? Because Utah's growing like crazy.
It is. Yes, and you guys down here are feeling it. Well, we're all feeling it, but you're really feeling it down here. So growth is a big challenge. For the first time, our in-migration exceeded our natural increase. So now more people are moving into the state than we are having babies, I guess. And so that has presented some challenges, but we have a housing shortage. Housing prices are high. Inflation has really hurt people who are looking for homes. And then on top of that, interest rates have gone up. So I think if everyone in the state of Utah who owned a home right now didn't own a home anymore, about 75% would be priced out of the housing market. It's not great, and it's a very big concern for us. So we've been working on some innovative ways to try to get more homes built. We need more homes. We implemented a first-time home buyer program that can help with down payments. It's not a grant, it's a loan. It's an interest-free loan that can get paid back when you refinance or sell a home. And we're looking to expand that. The governor recently has some really good ideas on how to increase the housing supply, increase starter homes so that people can actually get in. And home ownership is so important. It's renting. We need places to rent to, but we need people to own homes because that's where we get better education outcomes. We get lower crime rates. We get better civic engagement when people own their homes. It's fascinating to see the difference. And so we're working really hard to make sure that American dream, where people can have a home and be part of a community, can happen here in the state of Utah. So thank you for being good listeners and asking good questions. Appreciate being here with you today.